about a project that she's been leading for quite some time, but Julia and I were invited in a couple of months ago now, I think, because they saw the need for some funding to support the creation of some educational videos, I think is probably fair to say, Gina. But Gina is a senior consultant radiologist at the Royal Marsden, professor of gastrointestinal cancer imaging at Imperial College. I know Gina is renowned for her work within the world of MRI and imaging. And I guess I ought to be grateful to Gina for looking at some of my own personal scans. So there's a lot of the themes here. It's when Aura and I look at some of these people who have probably seen more of my insides than I have anyway. I'd just like to welcome Gina, who will give us a little bit of a chat about PREVAIL. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Paul, and it's lovely to meet you all. And thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this. I just want to say that PREVAIL isn't really a research project. It's a project, and it came about from really the COVID pandemic crisis, as it were, that led to us wanting to, I suppose, rethink what we were doing for our cancer patients. And if I may share screen, hopefully that will be permitted. I'm hoping that you can see a slideshow.
Yes, Gina, we can see it.
Okay. So you're used to me fiddling around with these monitors on a Thursday evening when we discuss PREVAIL. But the project itself is something that has involved a number of people, but I put our patient representatives at the top of that list because they've really been focusing our minds on what the problem has been during COVID. We've been involving cancer surgeons, oncologists, myself, radiologists, and other radiologists across different hospitals and cancer nurse specialists. And importantly, we've been linking up with GPs because we discovered fairly early on in this process that there was a gap between hospital and GP communication. And I suppose it's a bit ambitious, but we want to fix a lot of problems against the backdrop of COVID, things that we think could go better and therefore could help with patient care. And that's what's motivating us to do this and to keep striving with us. So that list is a list of the hospitals that have been involved, with individuals from each of these places, including the cancer nurse specialists who have been helping us develop what we hope will be a better pathway for patients coming through with a cancer diagnosis for treatment. So how did this come about? So if I just bring up the next slide. Yeah. So how it came about was at the beginning of COVID. Things were, as you might imagine, and for those of you who are unfortunate enough to be trying to be treated during that period, things were a little bit chaotic in the sense that patients were being prioritized in a rather sort of ad hoc fashion for their surgery and their treatment, and many patients were being discouraged from even coming forward for their diagnosis, or they feared coming forward for their diagnosis because of uncontrolled episodes of the virus within hospitals. So what we felt was that without some organization, the patients who really needed urgent surgery were going to get left, and the ones that perhaps could afford to be left, kept safe during this period, were maybe being rushed through for surgery and being put at risk from catching COVID or having complications ahead of when actually they could have been left for a little longer. Like yourself, Paul, if you've had a very good response to treatment, there's no mad rush to go in and operate, and you could have been saved from being dragged in. Whereas somebody else who hasn't had that response needs to be operated on pretty sharply. But we were very limited in how we could influence the pathway for these patients. So we thought amongst ourselves that this is an opportunity to change the way in which cancer patients are managed, I guess, within the different hospitals. And instead of using the traditional cancer times and time to wait and time from diagnosis to treatment, which have been the targets, something more sensible based on the actual way in which the cancer is growing, how fast is it growing, what kind of tumor is it, and use that rather than the traditional time to determine who should go as a priority for surgery, who we can afford to wait with, who can go and have their holiday and not worry about having to stop life, as it were, in order to be treated, and use a system that could be uniform across all the different hospitals, that will enable every patient to benefit from that kind of what we call stratification, like a triaging sort of approach. And so that this sort of illustrates the thinking behind it. So, starting from a very early stage, very small polyp that may not change for years, to something that's clearly behaving rather badly and needs to be treated urgently. So that's what, and at that time, and even now, that information isn't necessarily shared with the patient in a consistent manner, nor is it shared with the GPs. And there isn't that communication to say this is urgent, this is not urgent, and it's rather what we feel is that it's rather haphazard, the communication lines. And when we spoke to our GP colleagues who we got involved in this initiative, they felt that they were the last to know, yet the patients were often coming to them straight after being treated in the hospital to want a full summary of what's going on and what the future holds for them. And yet there was no information coming through in a timely manner from our hospitals. And that's whether we're a massive teaching hospital or a small DGH, it's the same throughout. So we wanted to develop something that could help patients in that way. And essentially, this is going to take time to change something that's been in place, for decades into something new. Using COVID as our sort of catalyst for change, like many things, when you have a crisis, it makes you think about what you're doing. And really, we're very grateful to Red Trousers for thinking about and input from you as well as patient representatives yourselves about how we can get this message across and how we can change things in terms of patients' expectations, the public's expectations about what cancer care means. And really, this is what we're hoping to be able to do. So the sort of things we've come up with are really, and I'll just show you this, which is, infographics to explain to patients and GPs, what is their tumor? Is it a diddly little thing like this, or is it a nasty thing? And what's happened to it after treatment? Has it become this? Or, is it under control or is it not under control? Is it causing an obstruction and it needs an emergency operation? These are the sorts of things that we would like to be able to say so that patients can have a full understanding, if they want it, for what they're about to embark upon. And we don't think that is currently available to all patients, and only those that are very motivated and knowledgeable can get the kind of information that we think is there for them and that they should be able to access. So, and from a radiology point of view, this is what I do. I look at scans and we look at them and decide, is it one of these or is it one of these, by looking at the tumor image and using that to inform the teams how they can best deal with it. And then after the initial treatment's been given, to look to see whether it's changed at all, if it's got better or worse. So these are sort of things that I think will hopefully help patients now and in the future. And we're grateful for all the support that you're able to give us to turn this tanker around, because it's going to be a bit of it's not going to happen in the next few months, I'm afraid, Paul. You're going to be you're going to have to take time over this.
I think it's when Gina and I first saw it, it was sort of music to our ears in a way, because sort of putting the patient a bit more at the centre. And I am somebody that was curious to a point, but I just didn't understand the papers that were flowing. So I think that's great, Gina. Thank you. And I think very proud to say that Julia and I are both on what Gina describes as the implementation team, and I think it's fair to say, Gina, we're providing sort of some business advice as well as to how to structure this thing up, because it isn't necessarily just Royal Marsden, it's cross NHS, and the focus for PREVAIL is on bowel cancer to begin with. So there's a tremendous opportunity for Red Trouser Day to support and create some videos with our name and branding on it. So thank you, Gina. I'm going to pause there, if I may. I have a couple